The talented idol Wen Yuan committed suicide in his 5th year of debut. It was revealed after his death that he had suffered from severe depression, but I still remember back in high school, when I was mocked for my weight, he, sitting behind me, would lean in and whisper, "Ignore them, you're really great. Really cute." So, a year ago, I found him cornered in the bathroom by obsessive fans. Without hesitation, I took his hand and we broke through the crowd. This time it was my turn to save my moon. It was another Friday, and after finally finishing overtime, I stretched lazily looking at the time on the lower right corner of my computer screen. Just 2 days left until Wen Yuan's concert. 2 more days until I could see him, feeling cheerful. I hummed a tune and shut down the computer. As I entered the elevator, I happened upon 2 female colleagues also leaving work. I instinctively stepped back to the corner and listened to them discuss Wen Yuan's new song and his upcoming concert. Then the conversation took a turn. "Did you see the incident with the obsessive fans yesterday?" "Yes, I saw it. Those obsessive fans are too much. I wonder how my Wen Yuan is doing." I heard that besides the driver, only Wen Yuan and his assistant were in the car. The fans chased them too closely, almost causing a series of accidents. The studio hasn't even released a statement yet. I hope it doesn't affect the concert the day after tomorrow. Those damn obsessive fans. If anything happens to my Wen Yuan, I won't let them off. Hearing this, I quickly opened Weibo and discovered that during the 2 days I spent working overtime for the concert, several trending searches related to Wen Yuan were at the top. Hashtag Wen Yuan obsessive fans, hashtag Wen Yuan car accident, hashtag Wen Yuan concert proceeding, hashtag. Clicking on it, I saw that many media outlets had posted surveillance footage. In the video, you could clearly see the obsessive fan's car closely following Wen Yuan's nanny van. Despite the van speeding up, it couldn't shake them off, and eventually, both vehicles collided at a traffic light. Frowning, I opened Wen Yuan's personal and studio's Weibo profiles, only to find that the last post was from 2 days ago. That meant since the incident, neither the studio nor Wen Yuan himself had responded. Not even to reassure their safety. Knowing Wen Yuan and his team for years, this was not their usual style. A wave of unease rose within me. I entered a fan group, where fans were also asking about Wen Yuan's condition, but the usually active major fans were silent. Ding. The elevator reached the ground floor. As I stepped out, I opened the chat with a longtime fellow fan to ask if she knew any insider info when suddenly, the 2 women ahead looked at their phones and gasped. I instinctively looked up and heard unfamiliar terms from their mouths. Wen Yuan, suicide, concert cancelled. What were they talking about? I blankly lowered my head and opened the trending searches on Weibo, only to find it suddenly lagging. After countless refreshes, I finally clicked in, only to see the top search highlighted in red and bold, followed by the word breaking, hashtag Wen Yuan suicide hashtag. Almost instinctively, I clicked on the trending search and saw a video posted by a marketing account with millions of followers just minutes ago. In the video, an ambulance was parked outside a villa, surrounded by security and staff. I could even see Wen Yuan's manager leaning on an assistant, crying nearly to the point of fainting. The camera then shifted, and everyone saw a limp hand hanging from the stretcher, its slender frame and overly pale fingertips too familiar. These were the hands I knew so well. They had gently patted my head during my saddest times. They had also tenderly strummed guitar strings under the gaze of countless fans. Talented idol Wen Yuan was found to have committed suicide at his home early this morning, at the age of 23. Seeing the glaring age 23 in the text, my body suddenly lost all strength, and I collapsed to the ground in that instant. Passers-by immediately gathered around, asking if I was feeling unwell, amid the chorus of kind concern. I bowed my head and covered my face, my cries escalating from a soft whimper to an outright breakdown. This wasn't supposed to happen. It shouldn't be this way. I was about to meet you. I was so close to seeing you. Just 2 more days, and I would have been at your concert. You were such a wonderful person. 2. Wen Yuan and I were high school classmates. With his striking looks and musical talent, he was scouted by a talent agency in junior high and became a trainee in our senior year of high school. His agency planned his debut, and to facilitate his upcoming schedule, he transferred to our school. During that brief period as classmates, we sat next to each other. At 18, overwhelmed by academic pressures, I habitually indulged in binge eating. Still in my developmental years, I quickly became the chubby kid in everyone's eyes. At that awkward and sensitive age, no matter how thick-skinned I was, the constant teasing about my weight by the boys in class eventually brought me to tears. Head down on the desk, while crying, I suddenly felt a gentle tap on my back with a pen cap. Leaning forward from the desk behind me, Wen Yuan whispered in my ear with a tender voice, "Ignore them." His hand softly patted my head, adding a slight weight. "You are really great, really cute." That single sentence redeemed 18-year-old me. In the gloomy, fleeting moments of senior year, his presence was my light. I never imagined any interaction with him. He seemed too perfect, inside and out. A stark contrast to our utterly ordinary high school. Even during those tense and brief senior days, countless peers, both boys and girls, showed affection for him. Everyone is drawn to beauty, and Wen Yuan himself was such a beautiful existence, debuting at 18. He always scored an S during his trainee evaluations, hailed as an all-around trainee by the teachers. After debuting, he skyrocketed to fame, becoming the absolute center on stage, a king in the eyes of his fans. 5 years post-debut without a single scandal, flawless performances every time, a perfect idol, a genius icon, this young man, Wen Yuan, was once my unattainable moon, but now, he had taken his own life. That night, I lay in my cramped rental room, clutching my pillow and crying until I couldn't breathe. I couldn't accept that the wonderful Wen Yuan had killed himself. There had been no signs before this. Even at an event just 2 days prior, he interacted with his fans as usual, his tone gentle, reminding everyone to stay safe on their way home. He was always good-natured, even politely countering attacks from detractors with reasoned arguments, apologizing for causing a disturbance when trapped by obsessive fans in a restroom, and rejecting numerous confessions during high school sincerely and politely. Yet such a good person, it was revealed after his death, suffered from severe depression. So, you weren't as happy as we thought, were you? 3. When I opened my eyes again, I was met with blinding lights. I instinctively covered my eyes and grunted softly, only to hear my colleague Xiaoli gently reminding me, Xiaoxi, no dozing off, you're up next. What? I responded instinctively, then fully opened my eyes to see the entire conference room looking my way. Seeing this, Xiaoli covered her face in dismay. You're done for, just as the leader was setting ambitious goals. Interrupted by me, his face looked a bit unpleasant. You're Xia from the budget department, right? What's the matter? Do you have any suggestions to make? I almost instinctively wanted to say no, but a glance at the projector in front of me showed the conspicuous words, April 2022 monthly meeting, but it's clearly 2023 now. Facing the displeased look from the leader, I blankly looked around at my colleagues in the meeting room, the person sitting opposite me. Wasn't it Xiao Xiao who resigned half a year ago? Looking again at the computer screen in front of me, it displayed April 8th, 2022, so, have I traveled back to a year ago? Xiaoxi, what are you daydreaming about? The leader is waiting for your response. Xiaoli next to me poked me impatiently as I hadn't spoken for a while. Creak, as I suddenly stood up, the chair under me made a noise, and the leader's face grew even more displeased. But then, sorry, leader. I just remembered I have an urgent matter. Let's end the meeting here for today. After saying this, I didn't even take my computer. I just grabbed my phone, turned around, and dashed out of the meeting room. To hell with this crappy job. I'm off to save my moon. I still remember this day last year. I sat in the meeting room for 3 hours, listening to the leader's grand promises while secretly scrolling through Weibo. As the meeting was about to end, as the leader's speech concluded, I stumbled upon that trending search, #WenYuan apology hashtag. It was a day all Wen Yuan's fans remember. The popular idol Wen Yuan was cornered in a mall bathroom by overzealous fans, and due to the mall's large crowd, it almost caused an accident. Later, it was only with the arrival of Wen Yuan's manager, the police, and mall security that the chaos was finally averted. But in the end, it was Wen Yuan, who had been trapped in the bathroom for 3 hours, who came out to apologize. At this moment, there were still a few hours left before Wen Yuan would post that apology tweet in my previous life, which means, right now, Wen Yuan is being cornered in the bathroom by fans in that mall, and that mall is just a street away from my office building. Is this fate? God, I dashed all the way. I still remember that night, lying in my bed in the rental, feeling wronged for Wen Yuan while watching videos of the incident. I remembered the location of that restroom, on the 3rd floor corner of the mall. As the mall was close to our company, I often went there for meals with colleagues, so now, I sprinted to the 3rd floor of the mall, seeing the restroom door already surrounded by a bustling crowd, some loudly calling Wen Yuan's name. Everyone, move aside, I shouted, grabbing a mop by the restroom door. Good. It was still wet. Like a warrior, I charged through, the mop clearing my path as people cried out, what splashed on my face? Ah. My new white dress, why the rush? Are you racing to reincarnate? Until I reached the restroom door, people finally realized what was happening. Nobody move. I swung the mop around, and the crowd took a few steps back. After all, it was a restroom mop. Who knows what it had been used for? Seeing this, I hummed in satisfaction, turned to the tightly closed restroom door, and no longer caring about appearances, I called out, hello, do you need help? There were a few seconds of silence from the other side, then, accompanied by the sound of unlocking, the tightly shut restroom door cracked open. I seized the opportunity and squeezed in. Bang. I quickly shut the door, blocking out the noisy crowd outside. Then, raising my head, I came face to face with Wen Yuan. It had been a long time since we last met. Back when I graduated from high school, it had been 5 years since I last saw him, yet the Wen Yuan standing before me still bore the youthful appearance I remembered so well. Dressed in a crisp white shirt, he was on a private trip, complete with a hat and a mask. Without any styling, his bangs simply fell across his forehead, looking fresh and well-behaved. He seemed quite surprised as he watched me burst in, his eyes widening slightly. This is the men's restroom, damn. I had forgotten that. No time to explain, I said, grabbing a mop with one hand and seizing his right hand with the other. Ignoring the astonishment on his face, I spoke earnestly and quickly. Come with me, I'm here to save you. I've thought about that phrase countless times since, each time cringing at my own words. Where did I get the confidence to utter such a cheesy line? And what made me think Wen Yuan would believe me? But, incredibly, he did believe me. Okay, he replied, not even asking why. Simply clasping my hand in return. The moment our eyes met and I saw the trust in his gaze, a surge of excitement overwhelmed me. The next second, amid a flurry of noise, I kicked open the restroom door, and then, under the watchful eyes of everyone outside, I led Wen Yuan, hand in hand, breaking through the crowd. I thought to myself, if fate has given me a second chance, this time, it's my turn to save you. Outside the restroom, the obsessed fans were stunned for a brief 2 seconds before they quickly followed. I was running at the pace I usually reserve for clocking in each morning, dragging Wen Yuan by the hand, as we passed an elevator. The door happened to open, I quickly rushed in, pressed the button for the first floor, then dashed out again, taking Wen Yuan into a nearby emergency exit and running upwards. I had been to this mall many times before. The emergency exit was hidden and not easy to find unless one was familiar with it. By the time the fans reached it, the elevator door had already closed, even though they took the adjacent elevator at top speed. By the time they reached the first floor, Wen Yuan was nowhere to be seen. By then, they probably thought they had lost him, but who could have guessed that Wen Yuan and I were actually taking a different route? The mall wasn't very tall, and soon Wen Yuan and I had run all the way to the rooftop. It was April, and the sunlight on the rooftop was just right, neither too warm nor too dry. It wasn't until we stopped that I realized I had returned to a year ago. At this very moment, the genius idol Wen Yuan, who hadn't yet committed suicide a year ago, was the one I had dragged all the way to the rooftop. Realizing this, I suddenly became nervous. What should I do? How could I explain that I wasn't some weirdo or an obsessive fan, but just a regular person who had traveled back in time a year to save his crush? Wait, fundamentally speaking, is traveling back a year even ordinary? So, let me explain. I let go of his hand, turned around awkwardly, and began to stammer out that I had simply seen something wrong and acted. But as I looked up, I met Wen Yuan's gaze, having been dragged all the way up here. He had pulled off his mask, breathing slightly heavily. As our eyes met, there was neither panic nor anger. He simply looked at me, nodded, and said softly, "Yes, I'm listening, huh?" I was afraid that my intensity had scared him, that he was only pretending to be submissive out of fear of what I might do to him, so, I immediately dropped the mop I was holding, kicking it far away while I stutteringly explained, "No, I mean, it's just that I couldn't stand by and do nothing." Couldn't stand by? No, I'm really not some crazy fan. You're not. I felt like crying but had no tears. You believe me, right, even though you might not remember me? I truly am a good person. I never expected him to remember me. After all, we were only classmates for a brief year, and even during that time, I hardly ever spoke to him. He was such a dazzling person. How could he possibly remember an inconspicuous, chubby girl from his class? But reality often surprises us. I remember you. As his words fell, a gentle breeze suddenly swept across the rooftop. I stared blankly at Wen Yuan in front of me. The wind of April brushed past his brows, lifting the hair on his forehead. His eyes curved as he looked at me, the corners of his lips slightly raised in a tender expression that was almost too gentle. Just like back then, he softly said in a gentle tone, "How could I forget? The one who sat in front of me during the first semester of senior year, Xiaoxi, long time no see." Tears almost instantly filled my eyes. This genius idol who had taken his own life due to depression a year later, he was now standing in front of me, smiling and calling out my name. For a moment, I was so bewildered that I couldn't tell if this was reality or an illusion. "It's good. It's so good. You're still alive. That's wonderful." There was a brief silence on the rooftop, then I suddenly took a deep breath, pushing back the tears. "Sorry. The wind is strong on the rooftop. It's making my eyes water," I said, trying to slow down my speech and pretend nothing was amiss. Speaking of which, it's been a long time since we last saw each other after graduating from high school, hasn't it? "How have you been lately?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly with the last few words. "How have you been, Wen Yuan, over the past year? Why did you choose to end your life a year later? Why did you suffer from severe depression? Why choose to end it all alone before a concert?" I had so many questions to ask him, but in the end, I could only lightly ask that one, "How have you been?" When Yuan paused for a second when I asked, then, he casually averted his gaze, the smile fading from his face. It's been okay, he said quietly, but what really counts as okay, more than anyone, I didn't want to relive the tragedy of the past life. So I sighed deeply and began gently advising him. I heard that the pressure on artists is quite high these days. I think you shouldn't put too much pressure on yourself, Buzz, and don't pay too much attention to those negative comments online. Let alone take them to heart, those people don't know anything, some people are just blind to beauty. Buzz, you're still young, it's normal to feel lost at this age, but please, never give up hope. Buzz, if you don't know who to talk to, you can always come to me. I don't have many qualities, but I am very good at keeping secrets. You know this too, I began, but when Yuan interrupted me, cautiously pointing at the cell phone in my pocket. I'm sorry to interrupt. But maybe you should take that call first. Damn it, who is it? I had barely answered the call when I was greeted by the roaring voice of the department manager. Xiaoxi, have you lost your mind? How dare you say that in front of the leaders during the meeting? Where are you now? Come back to the meeting immediately. Stay calm, don't get angry. Getting sick from anger helps no one. After mentally calming myself, I took a deep breath and said, come back to the meeting. Are you out of your mind? No way, spending 3 hours on a simple presentation, no wonder he's still just a director at his age, he'll never make it to top leadership. They pay me just 3,000, and they expect me to treat him like a god. You get what you pay for. I can't stand this class for another day, someone else can take my place, I'm going to resign tomorrow. With those final words, I hung up and blocked the number in one swift motion. This terrible company. I started interning here in my senior year of college, and after nearly 2 years, my salary hadn't increased at all. I was better off having quit a year ago. With a snort, I put down my phone, then, looking up, I caught Wen Yuan's shocked gaze. Xiaoxi, I had no idea you were so bold. Cough. Just occasionally, I coughed awkwardly, embarrassedly lowering my head and mumbling in a small voice, that's how you deal with idiots? Damn, I hope Wen Yuan doesn't think I'm two-faced. I couldn't hold it back for long, then, a soft chuckle sounded beside my ear, followed by Wen Yuan bursting into hearty laughter. I stared as he laughed carelessly in front of me, holding his stomach, bending over as if what I had just said was the funniest thing in the world. Wen Yuan, what's going on? He wasn't like this before. Could this be the early signs of depression? I was wondering whether to suggest he see a doctor. Sorry, Xiaoxi, I'm not laughing at you. He finally stopped laughing, wiping the tears from his eyes. I just think what you said makes a lot of sense. After saying this seriously, his eyes softly curved into a gentle smile. So, Xiaoxi, since you're resigning, how about considering being my assistant? The gentle breeze of April brushed past. I looked at Wen Yuan. Standing so close, his lips still bore a faint smile, his eyes filled with tenderness. But there was a moment when I suddenly felt, if I didn't agree right now, he might just disappear like this breeze. Resigning to become Wen Yuan's assistant was definitely a win-win, not to mention, if I wanted to save Wen Yuan, being his assistant was the perfect position to stay close to him. Wen Yuan, being the top celebrity in his company's boy group, often had individual schedules, so he had a personal assistant. Now with me arriving, there would be two. I was a bit worried about what the other group members and the manager might think. Surprisingly, the next day after I resigned, Wen Yuan brought me to the management company, and both the group members and the managers welcomed me warmly. Wen Yuan's group consisted of 4 people, and almost all the group's popularity was driven by him alone, so wherever there was a stage, Wen Yuan is definitely the center stage superstar. Before I arrived, I wondered if, in such a group with stark disparities in status, the other members might resent Wen Yuan, but as it turned out, upon my arrival, I found myself encircled by the other 3 members, all buzzing with gossip about my relationship with Wen Yuan. I instinctively looked towards Wen Yuan for help, only to see him being called away by his manager. Don't worry, you are brought in by the captain. We won't do anything to you, the second oldest in the group said with a laugh.
Yeah.
Really? It's my first time seeing the captain bring someone along, the youngest member said curiously. Did I hear right that you are high school friends with the captain? Has he always been like this since high school? The third oldest asked. Like what? I asked instinctively. Well, he seemed to struggle to find the right words to describe Wen Yuan, and after a long pause, he blurted out, desireless. Like a celestial being. Yes, exactly, the other 2 immediately agreed. I could understand him being described as a celestial being, but desireless, what was that about? Seeing my confused expression, the 3 of them quickly explained, it feels like he has no desires. You probably know, our group has really taken off thanks to him. At first, we were a bit resentful, but over time we realized he never really saw us as competition. Oh, I don't mean that in a bad way. We all acknowledge the captain's excellence, and it's only right that he consistently takes the center spot. He's always been good to us, never arrogant or complacent, as if it's just the way things should be, but still, it always feels like, the third oldest hesitated again, finally, unable to bear it. The youngest added, "It feels like he could do without us, as if he doesn't care who his teammates are. Even though he stands with us, he always seems so distant." As soon as this was said, the other two nodded in agreement. Watching their expressions, I couldn't help but laugh. "When Yuan, you really do have three great teammates, but despite all this, you still like him a lot, right?" At this question, the three of them blushed a bit but didn't hesitate to reply, "Of course. Such an incredible leader, I could boast about him for a lifetime. I must have done many good deeds in my past life to be in the same group as the captain in this life, not going to lie. Every time I go to the temple to pray, I ask the Buddha to ensure our captain's career goes smoothly." Whoa, dude, that's too much. Praying for the captain and not including us, is that the point? I watched the three bicker, suddenly realizing that the average age of the group must be around 20. They are still kids, at 23 years old in a previous life and 22 now. I didn't even realize that I was barely older than them. 2 years of grinding in the workforce had left my heart colder than a fishmonger's knife at a supermarket. Soon after, when Yuan and the manager returned, the manager holding my employment contract, "Are you signing this now?" I was still in disbelief when it was time to sign the contract. "Is there something about the salary and benefits that dissatisfies you?" the manager asked kindly, while when Yuan also looked over. "No, not at all, I'll sign right away." Who could be unhappy with a 5-figure salary? If it weren't for all the people around, I'd have asked Wen Yuan if he was inflating my value. Do I really deserve this? But then again, I thought, I am someone who traveled back in time from a year in the future, about to save Wen Yuan who would otherwise end his life. How could I not be worth it? I was so worth it. Without any hesitation, I signed my name with a flourish. Seeing this, Wen Yuan chuckled, then pulled out his phone. "Let's add each other on WeChat then. I'll send you my address and the door lock code later." Sure. Completely off guard, I happily opened the QR code scanner. With a beep, I suddenly realized something. Wait, maybe you should scan me instead. The next second, Wen Yuan was already staring at my phone screen, frozen. On the WeChat page, it showed that we were already friends. Looking further up to the notes section, there was a moon icon. 8. It turns out we were already friends. Seeing this, Wen Yuan was only stunned for a brief 2 seconds, then, as if he had seen nothing, he put away his phone and gave me a slight smile. "You can just message me directly then?" I nodded hastily, trying to cover my tracks. I suddenly remembered we added each other after graduating from high school, but there were so many people adding you at the time, you probably forgot to update my note. Hearing this, Wen Yuan just smiled and said nothing more. That afternoon, Wen Yuan had a solo shooting task, and I went with him along with another assistant, Xiao Song. Getting into the car, Xiao Song sat in the passenger seat, while Wen Yuan and I sat in the back. Stealing a glance at Wen Yuan, who was catching up on sleep next to me, I quickly looked away, only then realizing I felt a bit nervous. During our school days, I had a brief moment alone with Wen Yuan. It was during a lunch break, right after the bell rang, and all the students rushed to the cafeteria to grab food, leaving only me behind. Back then, I was afraid to go to the cafeteria because there had been an instance where a classmate mocked me for eating a lot despite being overweight. I took out the bread I bought that morning from my desk drawer to serve as my lunch. Just as I was about to stand up to get some water, I suddenly heard faint breathing. That's when I remembered, Wen Yuan was still in the classroom at that time. Wen Yuan was already preparing for his debut, and having just finished an overnight shoot that morning, he didn't go to the cafeteria, but was napping on his desk. In May, even the air carried a hint of early summer restlessness. Wen Yuan, dressed in a white school uniform shirt, lay on his desk, his face half hidden in sleep. I carefully turned around, separated by a desk, and unconsciously slowed my breathing, silently watching him for a long time, until a cloud drifted across the sun, and a beam of light shone through the window. The eyelashes of Wen Yuan, lying on the desk, trembled, and his eyebrows furrowed. At that moment, as if under some spell, I instinctively reached out to block the light. The light filtered through my palm, casting a shadow on his face. In his sleep, Wen Yuan's brows slowly relaxed. Watching this scene, my cheeks felt slightly warm. The empty classroom, the quiet corridors of the teaching building, the distant sounds of the soccer team practicing on the field outside, and between the two ends of a desk, the rapid beating of my heart and the prolonged breaths. The May sunlight shone on the back of my hand, carrying a hint of heat. Summer was quietly arriving. Just then, there was a goal on the field, suddenly sparking a burst of cheers. Like a startled rabbit, I was about to withdraw my hand, when Wen Yuan, who had been lying with his eyes tightly shut, suddenly opened them. At that moment, I even held my breath. Wen Yuan raised his head, his eyes still slightly bewildered from sleep, and the other half of his face marked with a red imprint from lying down. He looked at me blankly. He glanced at my hand shielding him from the sunlight, then looked at me and slowly blinked his eyes. It seemed that he was still groggy from just waking up. Xiaoji, classmate. My lips moved slightly, and a myriad of excuses flashed through my mind, but my body reacted quicker, stiffly retracting the hand that blocked the light and extending the other. bread, would you like some? What am I even saying? If I was merely flustered before, now I was utterly embarrassed. Who is Wen Yuan? He's a future superstar about to debut. Would someone like him care for a strawberry bread from the snack stand that costs 5 yuan? I almost wanted to chop off these presumptuous hands of mine. My mind racing to explain that my actions were just a momentary lapse, but I wasn't quicker than Wen Yuan. Ah. Thank you. He seemed to have finally woken up, instinctively taking the piece of bread from my hands. Then, under my nervously suffocating gaze, he glanced at the strawberry design on the packaging and suddenly chuckled softly. His voice was still a bit hoarse from just waking up, yet it remained gentle. Classmate Xiaoji, how did you know I was just getting hungry? At his words, my face turned red, and I stuttered without being able to speak a word. You see, he's just that kind of person. He had already seen through everything, yet he didn't make me feel embarrassed. The next morning when I arrived at the classroom, there was a beautifully wrapped box in my drawer. Inside was a limited edition strawberry mousse from a high-end bakery. Beside it was a greeting card. I thought you might like this cake. Thank you. The bread was delicious. I instinctively turned my head and saw Wen Yuan at the back desk, surrounded by people. From the greetings and farewells of the classmates, I then realized that this was Wen Yuan's last day at school. Soon, he would debut. After today, I would no longer see him at school. As if sensing my gaze, Wen Yuan, amidst the crowd, suddenly looked towards me. Our eyes met, and he smiled gently at me, without a word of goodbye or any unnecessary greetings. This boy named Wen Yuan, from that day on, became the moon I could look at but could never reach. 9. The afternoon shooting went smoothly, considering I was a newcomer. Wen Yuan had arranged for Xiao Song to handle most tasks, and I just needed to stand by and watch over things. However, for some reason, after Wen Yuan was ready and went off to shoot, the looks from the staff around me were odd, making me even more uncomfortable. It wasn't until Xiao Song rushed back from getting Wen Yuan's coffee, not minding that he had spilled some on his hand. Xiaoji, you need to check Weibo, you and Brother Wen are trending. What? Upon hearing this, I instinctively pulled out my phone and opened Weibo, only to realize that some things are unavoidable, no matter what, except this time. I was trending a day later than in my previous life, and I was included in the trend as well. Hashtag Wen Yuan blocked by sasaengs in restroom hashtag. Sure enough, it was the video from yesterday's incident that had been leaked. Due to the suddenness of my rebirth, I had been focused solely on rescuing Wen Yuan, completely forgetting that my face would also be exposed to the public. No wonder the staff had been giving me strange looks. Just a few hours after the video was leaked, Weibo was already in an uproar. The popular idol was cornered by sasaeng fans in the restroom, and was later rescued by an unknown mysterious woman, with the final scene showing them hand in hand, breaking through the siege. The video was so intriguing that even passersby couldn't help but click on it. After watching the video, Wen Yuan's fans were extremely angry, and they all came forward to condemn the sasaeng fans for disrespecting the artist's privacy. The haters, after viewing the video, swarmed like flies sensing a scent, accusing Wen Yuan of staging the whole thing for attention. As the battle between the two sides heated up, bystanders in the comment section turned their attention to me. Soon, the hashtag a mysterious woman with Wen Yuan climbed into the trending searches. Don't worry, my assistant Xiao Song reassured me as he set down a coffee. Manager Zhou called me earlier. Wen Yuan had anticipated this surge of attention. He had already discussed it with Manager Zhou before signing the contract this morning. We'll just say you are the new assistant, and you were there to pick him up because Wen Yuan had a private schedule yesterday. Since you're new to the public eye, the PR department will minimize the impact on you. Later, Wen Yuan's main account will issue an apology on Weibo. Once everyone focuses on him, they'll soon forget about you. That explained everything. That's why Wen Yuan had a long talk with the manager this morning. Why the manager signed the contract with me so swiftly, and why a newbie like me could start running schedules with Wen Yuan right off the bat. Everything was orchestrated by Wen Yuan on my behalf. What about Wen Yuan? I looked up at Xiao Song. Why does Wen Yuan have to apologize when it was the sasaeng fans who cornered him in the restroom? It was the same in the past. Wen Yuan did nothing wrong, so why is he the one apologizing? Hearing this, Xiao Song opened his mouth hesitantly. Well, Wen Yuan, after all, he's a celebrity. He's probably used to it by now, but should he be? I questioned. What's wrong? A familiar voice reached my ears. Wen Yuan, who had just finished a photo shoot, came back for a break and saw Xiao Song and me exchanging glances. Hearing his voice, Xiao Song turned and explained, Wen Yuan, you and Xiaoji are trending. Oh, that, Wen Yuan replied, having already discussed it with Manager Zhou. Then he turned to me. I'm sorry, Xiaoji, for the trouble. I've spoken to Manager Zhou about drawing the public's attention to myself. Why should you apologize? I interrupted, suddenly feeling angry. What do these trolls know? They're just venting their frustrations online because their lives are unhappy. It's not your fault, so why should you apologize? The more I spoke, the angrier I got. We should fight back. Doesn't your company have money? Spend some to delete those posts. No, we should just get a lawyer and sue them. Why should they insult you? Being cornered by sasaeng fans in the restroom wasn't your choice, Xiaoxi, when Yuan suddenly interrupted me, calling my name seriously, then leaned down. Looking at me somewhat helplessly, there are too many, we can't insult them all back, delete all the posts, or sue them all, there's no point in doing futile things, he said softly. It's okay, Xiaoxi, looking into his eyes, I suddenly felt a bit aggrieved. Why do you still sound so gentle even when saying things like this? So, I looked up defiantly at Wen Yuan. I won't. When Yuan was taken aback, we just looked at each other, at an impasse, until a staff member came to call him to continue the shoot. He muttered a soft apology. Then with his head bowed he took a step back and turned to re-enter the photography studio. But why are you the one apologizing? I lowered my eyes to my phone screen, biting my lip in frustration as I read through the malicious comments from trolls. Not me. When Yuan took a break again, he saw me furiously typing away at my phone, passionately clashing with the trolls online. Xiao Song whispered to Wen Yuan when he returned, she's been at it for a while. She even got banned and switched accounts several times. Hearing this, Wen Yuan looked over in surprise. I met his gaze with a snort and continued to fiercely engage with the trolls. Stubborn Wen Yuan, I'm not listening to you. You might be patient, but I can't stand others talking about you like that. I'll give them a piece of my mind. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Wen Yuan whisper something to Xiao Song, who suddenly left. I pretended not to notice and kept on fervently battling the trolls. I unleashed all my skills, silencing the trolls, even gaining fame among Wen Yuan's fans for my fiery defense. It wasn't until Wen Yuan finally finished his shoot and came back to remove his makeup, when I faced him again, the anger inside me had nearly dissipated. Still, I sat there awkwardly, not speaking to him. Wen Yuan sat down right next to me, and the makeup artist approached to remove his makeup. As he closed his eyes, I cautiously glanced at him, but soon after, Xiao Song returned, and I quickly looked back down at my phone. I could hear the rustling of plastic bags, then the sound of a box opening and something being placed on the table. I looked up instinctively, then I saw a familiar hand push a beautiful slice of strawberry cake towards me. Wen Yuan's voice came, slightly coaxing. Maybe you like strawberry cake? The strawberry cake was delicious, and I was easily placated. I nibbled on the spoon, enjoying the cake Wen Yuan bought, and when I saw him smiling at me as I ate, I suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. It was Wen Yuan who had been wronged. Yet here I was angry at him, expecting him to buy me cake to cheer me up. Oh Xiaoxi, understand your role, you're here to support him? I took another big bite of the cake, pondering how to advise Wen Yuan not to take things for granted just because he's used to them. Thinking about how the trolls were the real problem. Xiaoxi, would you come with me somewhere later? Wen Yuan suddenly asked. Huh? I looked at him blankly, having just enjoyed his cake, and immediately nodded, sure. So 10 minutes later, I sat in the passenger seat, looking at Wen Yuan who was buckling his seatbelt. What about Xiao Song? Doesn't he need to come? No need, what follows is a private matter. Oh, I nodded, wondering if it was appropriate for me to join his private plans. Then I heard Wen Yuan continue, Xiaoxi, thank you. I was a bit slow to respond, staring at him blankly. Would you be disappointed in me? He asked, turning to look at me with a gentle smile. Would you think that I'm not as good as you imagined? How could I instinctively argued, but looking into his eyes, I fell silent. Where should I begin? Should I start from when I was 18, from the hand that gently patted my head, and from the words, you're really good, really cute? Or should I start from that early summer afternoon, when a boy and I were just separated by a desk, and I instinctively reached out to block the light for him? And he thanked me as he took my strawberry bread. With my eyes cast down, I whispered, in my heart, you are very good. Upon hearing this, Wen Yuan softly chuckled. But Xiaoxi, I am not a god, he said, somewhat helplessly yet half seriously. I too make compromises, follow rules, and do whatever it takes to climb higher. They're right, actually. I really don't care about who's around me. It turned out he had heard the morning's conversation. I've gotten used to doing my best, and I must always do so because there's only one spot at the top. To meet the fans' expectations, I'll give it my all. You see, Xiaoxi, I'm not much different from ordinary people. After saying this, he flashed me a smile. I opened my mouth but couldn't utter a word. The car started moving. When I checked Weibo again, Wen Yuan's main account had posted an apology 10 minutes earlier. The familiar text was exactly the same as in my previous life, however, this time, under the top comment, Wen Yuan replied to a fan who asked about his relationship with me. Wen Yuan, we are very good friends. I blinked, suppressing a sudden, inexplicable surge of emotion, stealing a glance at Wen Yuan, who was driving next to me and ensuring he couldn't see me. I reached out and quietly liked the comment. 12. Half an hour later, the car slowly stopped. I stared at the hospital building in front of me, still somewhat dazed, turning my head. I saw Wen Yuan skillfully pulling out a hat and mask and handed me one as well. Let's get out. I want to introduce you to someone. Minutes later, standing in front of a hospital bed, I gazed at the frail figure inside and suddenly thought of several things, like why Wen Yuan, who was always a top student, chose to drop out and debut just before the college entrance examination, and why the gentle Wen Yuan, in my previous life, suffered from severe depression and eventually chose to end his life. In the past life, 3 months later, a major paparazzo suddenly revealed that the popular idol Wen Yuan attended an entertainment event on the day a family member passed away, missing the chance to see them one last time. Upon this revelation, critics seized the opportunity to accuse Wen Yuan of being heartless and mercenary, unworthy of being an idol for disregarding even his family for a bit of gain, causing even some fans to doubt and lose faith in him. Although this information was later clarified by the management company, as Wen Yuan's family background was well known since his debut, his father, a police officer who died in the line of duty, and his mother, an elementary school music teacher, both of his parents having died early, making his background very clean and transparent. I had once thought it was just a rumor until the person next to me called out her name when the girl in the bed turned around. Showing a face that bore a slight resemblance to Wen Yuan, brother, she smiled and called out to Wen Yuan, then looked at me with a puzzled gaze. Is this sister the good friend you mentioned? Congenital heart disease? Counting back, she was born the year Wen Yuan's father died in the line of duty. She was a posthumous child. Suddenly, this thought popped into my head. So that's how it is. That's the reason. That's why Wen Yuan dropped out of school to debut right before the college entrance exams. That's why in my previous life, there was that paparazzi leak. That's why, ultimately, Wen Yuan suffered from depression and chose to end his life, because his full-blooded younger sister would die 3 months later. Hello, I spoke with some difficulty, looking at this beautiful little angel in front of me, and with all my strength, managed to smile. My name is Xiaji, I'm your brother's friend. Congenital heart disease, in severe cases, can prevent one from living to adulthood. And the cost of treatment, including a heart transplant, is no small sum. That's probably why Wen Yuan gave up on his exams and chose to debut. A police father who died early in the line of duty, a mother who was a primary school music teacher with a modest income, and a young sister suffering from congenital heart disease. Wen Yuan was gentler and stronger than I had imagined. After leaving the hospital, Wen Yuan told me that he originally planned to visit Wen Yi in the hospital yesterday afternoon, but realized halfway that he was being followed by sasaeng fans. To avoid exposing Wen Yi's existence, he changed his route, which is why he ended up being cornered by the sasaeng fans in a mall bathroom. Wen Yi has a severe congenital heart disease, and the doctors said that without a heart transplant, she won't live past 14. Wen Yuan spoke softly next to me in the quiet of the night hospital. When I was 12, my father died in the line of duty. My mother was pregnant with Wen Yi at the time and almost lost her due to the shock. Wen Yi was premature. Times were tough back then, so when I was discovered by a talent scout later, I was happier than anyone. I told myself that I had to work harder, be better than anyone else, and always firmly hold the center spot. But as time passed, I started to feel like, I've always been alone. As he turned to look at me, the clouds covering the moon drifted away, the pale moonlight bathed him, and as he looked down at me, his eyes and brows softened impossibly. Such a gentle and strong person, yet at times, so fragile as if he might shatter upon touch. Xiaji, thank you for being by my side. After that day, I started visiting the hospital every few days. I thought, if Wen Yi's death was the cause of Wen Yuan's depression in my previous life, could this reborn butterfly change something? Time flew quickly, and before I knew it, 3 months had passed. I counted the days in my heart, unsure of the exact date of Wen Yi's death, so on the day Wen Yuan was to attend an event in my previous life, I took the day off to stay with Wen Yi in the hospital all day. Seeing my anxious expression, Wen Yuan asked with concern, what's wrong? Is there some emergency? I opened my mouth but didn't know how to tell him. Wen Yuan's event had been scheduled a month ago. It was a large-scale event, and as the top member of his group, he definitely had to attend, and as someone who had returned from rebirth, I couldn't tell him that his sister might die this afternoon, and he might not even see her for the last time. Rebirth, after all, was too fantastical. It's nothing, just, could you leave the event early today to visit Wen Yi at the hospital? I struggled to find an excuse. She just called me and said she missed you, asking you to bring her a strawberry cake this afternoon. That girl? She's becoming more clingy by the day. Didn't we just visit her the day before yesterday? Wen Yuan laughed upon hearing this. All right, I got it. Tell her I'll try to visit her as soon as I can. Okay, I nodded, though I still felt somewhat uneasy. When we got to the hospital, Wen Yi was eagerly pulling me to watch a live broadcast of an event. The little one is a loyal fan of Wen Yuan's, commenting and speculating with me about what outfit her brother would wear this time. Wen Yuan's band was the last to perform, and checking the time, I figured there was still a while to go. Midway through, the 4-drip Wen Yi was on was almost done, so I went out to call a nurse to change it, but in just those few short seconds, when I returned, Wen Yi was suddenly missing from her hospital bed. My heart sank instantly, and while pulling out my phone to call Wen Yuan, I turned and ran out to search for her. Wen Yuan's mother was busy with a full day of classes, So I was the only one accompanying her at the hospital. After the call connected, I listened to the ringing tone, hoping Wen Yuan would pick up quickly. As I started to tear up, I searched the entire hospital floor, but Wen Yi was nowhere to be found. My unease peaked at that moment. Fearing something bad had happened to her, when the call finally went through. "Hello, Xiaoji," Wen Yuan's calm voice came through. "I'm about to go on stage. What's up, Wen Yuan? Wen Yi is missing." I almost shouted, "What should I do? I can't find her. I just went to get a nurse to change her for, and she disappeared." The background was noisy, then Wen Yuan seemed to move to a quieter place. "Xiaoji, don't panic. Wen Yi isn't a little kid anymore. She wouldn't just wander off. I'm coming over right now, just wait for me." After that, I heard voices of his teammates in the background. "Hey, Captain, where are you going? We're about to go on stage." The next second, the call was cut off. Staring at the darkened phone screen, I forced myself to calm down. Wen Yuan was right. Wen Yi wasn't a little kid anymore, and this was a hospital. She couldn't just vanish without reason, especially since she was just watching the live broadcast a second ago. Wait, the live broadcast. I suddenly remembered that when I noticed Wen Yi was missing, the sound from the hospital room was gone. I realized something was off. The next second, I turned and ran towards the hospital lobby. The lobby was bustling with people, and a large electronic screen was showing a live broadcast of a grand event. Just then, it was the popular boy band's turn to perform, and everyone was eagerly watching the screen, only to see 3 members instead of the usual 4. Wen Yuan, who was supposed to be at the center, was missing. At the same time, in an inconspicuous corner of the lobby, a small figure lay on the ground, hands clutching her chest in immense pain. She opened her mouth but was in too much pain to make a sound, trying to reach out to passers-by for help, but everyone's attention was fixed on the live broadcast on the big screen, and no one noticed her plea for help. I finally arrived, scanned the room, and immediately spotted her lying in the corner. As Wen Yuan arrived at the hospital, Wen Yi was in the operating room receiving emergency treatment. The TV in her room had malfunctioned, and to catch her brother's performance, Wen Yi had run to the hospital lobby. In a previous life, I wasn't there, and when Yuan didn't arrive in time, Wen Yi collapsed alone in a corner of the hall and wasn't noticed until the boy band had finished walking the red carpet. Ultimately, because the best time for rescue was missed, her life was tragically fixed at the age of 10. This time, because of my timely appearance, Wen Yi was successfully rescued, saving her life. It was only then, outside the emergency room, that Wen Yuan and I finally breathed a sigh of relief, ignoring the risk of exposing his identity. He joined me in personally escorting Wen Yi back to her ward after the rescue. This was the first time I saw such a vulnerable side of Wen Yuan. He seemed terrified. Back in the ward, he held the still unconscious Wen Yi's hand and repeatedly whispered, "I'm sorry." Seeing this, I approached quietly and comforted him. "Wen Yuan, don't be like this, it's not your fault." To my surprise, upon hearing my voice, Wen Yuan stood up abruptly and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Xiaoxi, thank you so much." Wen Yuan's voice was choked with emotion. "Thank goodness she's okay. Thank goodness, Xiaoxi, what would I have done without you? I can't lose Wen Yi." His sudden embrace stunned me. It was the first time I was so close to him. Close enough to feel his trembling breath. If it hadn't been for this accidental rebirth, I might never have seen this side of Wen Yuan in my lifetime. I can't imagine how remorseful he must have felt in his previous life, having missed seeing Wen Yuan last time because he was at an event, and how he must have felt rushing to the hospital too late. Wen Yi had fallen ill while going to the hall to watch a live broadcast. She had collapsed in that unnoticed corner just to see her brother. I lowered my eyes and hugged him back, gently patting his back. "It's okay, Wen Yuan, it's all right now. I won't let anything happen to you. After all, this is why I was reborn." That day after returning, Wen Yuan was severely scolded by his manager and the company's head. Online, there was widespread speculation about why Wen Yuan, who was scheduled to appear, ultimately did not attend the event. Some netizens even leaked photos of Wen Yuan at the hospital that day. Although they were taken secretly, it was obvious from his clothes, which were the same as those worn by other members at the event, that he had rushed there. Eventually, the agency preempted any rumors by clarifying on Weibo that Wen Yuan had to leave the event suddenly due to a family member's sudden illness. Although the fans were somewhat disappointed, they expressed their understanding. 2 months later, there was good news from the hospital. A matching heart was found for Wen Yi. With that, the fate of this 10-year-old girl was completely rewritten. As the butterfly whose wings had stirred, I too finally felt relieved. Wen Yi didn't die, and Wen Yuan didn't have to suffer through the death of a loved one while also facing attacks from malicious fans, as he had in his previous life. Even in the end, he had to cooperate with the company to deny Wen Yi's existence to maintain the perfect image of Wen Yuan in the fans' hearts. I couldn't imagine how Wen Yuan had endured all that alone in his previous life, even during various events. He continued to smile gently at the fans below the stage. Wen Yi's surgery was very successful, everything seemed to be moving in a positive direction. I glanced at the calendar. At this time, there were less than 5 months left until Wen Yuan's suicide in his previous life. In this life, with Wen Yi alive and Wen Yuan not being attacked over a family death. Perhaps I've managed to change the fate of Wen Yuan's suicide, right? I've become increasingly devoted to my job as an assistant. After all, a job like this with a high salary, excellent benefits, and an easygoing boss is a rare find in a lifetime. At the end of the year, the boy band began preparations for their national tour. Standing in the audience, I watched Wen Yuan rehearsing on stage. It was the first time I saw Wen Yuan perform so closely. He truly was a natural-born stage king. Executing each dance move cleanly and perfectly, even a drop of sweat on his chin sparkling under the stage lights. It seemed that wherever he stood, others merely faded into the background, with all eyes drawn to him unconsciously. I found myself mesmerized. The rehearsal ended, and as the staff brought over water and towels, the other members chattered about going out for hot pot later. Wen Yuan took a towel from a staff member and wiped his sweat. By chance, he saw me standing below the stage. He then turned around, grabbed 2 bottles of water, and walked towards me. Reaching the edge of the stage, he crouched down and smiled, asking, "How was it?" "Amazing." I stood below, looking up at him, not skimping on my praise, genuinely exclaiming, "You shine." On stage, Wen Yuan seemed to capture all the light. Hearing this, Wen Yuan's smile widened. He extended his hand, offering me one of the bottles of water. Those familiar eyes were as tender as ever, but this time, they included me. "Then I'll share half with you." I followed his gesture to the water bottle, which sparkled under the stage lights. After a while, Wen Yuan stood up and went backstage to change. As Xiao Song came to gather things and call me, he found me alone, holding the water bottle and smiling goofily. He looked puzzled. "Xiaoji, what's wrong?" "We need to go." "Nothing." I shook my head, unable to hide the smile on my lips. "I just realized. I think I've fallen for the moon, just as all things are phototropic." My affection for Wen Yuan was just the same. At 18, I realized I've grown to love my job as Wen Yuan's assistant more and more. Great salary, excellent benefits, and my boss is the man I adore. There's no better job than this, I thought cheerfully. As for confessing my feelings, that was naturally impossible. The moon should hang high in the sky, not something a mortal like me should covet. I still had that much self-awareness. Lost in bliss, I forgot there was something else. It wasn't until Wen Yuan finished a personal schedule one day, and because the driver took a leave, Xiao Song stepped in temporarily. Wen Yuan and I were in the back seat when Xiao Song noticed a car persistently tailing us. "Brother, what should we do? It seems like a sasaeng fan." Suddenly, I remembered something, quickly checking my phone. It was nearly a month until the rear-end accident that occurred in Wen Yuan's past life. Was it happening earlier now? Had my mere presence hastened the events of the past life? Wen Yuan had one last concert in a few days, and he absolutely couldn't afford any mishaps now. Wen Yuan frowned. "Let's speed up and lose them at the next red light." "Got it." Xiao Song immediately accelerated. Meanwhile, I gazed out of the car window at the increasingly familiar scenery, feeling my anxiety peak. I still remembered from a video in my past life, the accident happened less than a kilometer away from here. I was just about to remind Xiao Song to take a detour to avoid the intersection where the rear-end collision occurred in the past. Then, I saw the traffic light ahead suddenly turn red. Before I could react, Xiao Song instinctively slammed on the brakes. The next second, a harsh impact came from the back seat. Even as Wen Yuan lunged towards me, I was still thinking about what I had heard in the elevator in my past life. They said that at the time of the accident, apart from the driver, there were only Wen Yuan and his assistant in the car. The sasaeng fans were following too closely, almost causing a pile-up. Just Wen Yuan and his assistant. So, Xiao Song and I were both sitting in the back seat, like now, and the side where I was sitting took the brunt of the impact. The huge force threw me against the front passenger seat, the rear window shattered, and shards of glass grazed my body, with one slicing across my neck, instantly staining my collar with blood. "Xiaoji, Xiaoji." I heard Wen Yuan shouting my name. I tried to respond, but the severe pain left me unable to speak, my chest aching from the impact, and I soon passed out. Just before losing consciousness, I finally understood the issue that had been troubling me all this time. Why did Wen Yuan from my past life decide to commit suicide 2 days before his last concert, after a car accident, after experiencing the death of loved ones, being sensationalized by the media, attacked by malicious fans, and doubted by his own fans? The trigger that ultimately drove him to suicide was because he felt responsible for the harm that came to innocent people. 19. When I opened my eyes again, the white ceiling of a hospital room greeted me. I tried to speak, but Xiao Song stopped me. Hey, don't get up. The doctor said you need to rest in bed for a month." But I was frantic, ignoring my sore throat that had been dry for too long, and hoarsely asked, Where's Wen Yuan? Where is he? Don't worry, brother Wen is fine, you were the most injured in the car. He stayed with you for a whole day and night, I just persuaded him to go rest, you don't know, I've never seen brother Wen so scary before, those sasaengs fans almost cried out of fright. And brother Wen even called the police despite sister Zhou's objections. Xiao Song was about to say more, but I interrupted him, gripping his arm with all my strength. Take me to see Wen Yuan, hurry up. Ah. But you're not well yet, never mind that, just take me to see Wen Yuan, quick. It wasn't until Xiao Song pushed me in the wheelchair to the villa that my mind was full. Please, I must make it, I prayed fervently. At the villa's entrance, Xiao Song first pressed the doorbell several times. But there was no response. Strange, brother Wen should be back. Ah. Xiaoji, how are you standing up? Move aside. I dragged my frail body, somehow finding the strength to push Xiao Song aside and entered the previously given passcode of Wen Yuan into the door lock. The next second, accompanied by the electronic voice saying door opened, I rushed into the villa. No one was in the living room on the first floor, the kitchen, or the balcony. I ran swiftly upstairs, bypassed the guest room, and pushed open the door of the master bedroom, and then, I was face to face with Wen Yuan. Xia, Wen Yuan looked at me, stunned, his unkempt hair was messy, his eyes red from lack of sleep, and he was wearing a light blue home suit, the exact same one he wore in the ambulance in my past life. Wen Yuan, I called his name and threw myself into his arms, holding on tight, so tight, thank goodness, really thank goodness, you're still alive, and I made it in time. I called his name over and over, crying until I was breathless. Wen Yuan was initially stunned by my arrival. Xiao Song, who had followed me and rushed upstairs, was so surprised that his mouth hung open. After a long while, Wen Yuan reached out and gently embraced me. Xiaoxi, he called my name. I didn't look up, continuing to cry buried in his chest. He seemed to finally understand something and sighed softly. Stop crying, he whispered comfortingly, I'm still here. The bathroom door in the master bedroom beside us was tightly shut. Only the edge of the door gap revealed a corner of transparent tape. After that day, my primary doctor was so shocked by my brave act that he insisted that Xiao Song keep a close watch on me, making me stay in the hospital for a whole month. When I was finally able to leave the hospital, it coincided with the day of Wen Yuan's last concert, a concert I hadn't seen in my previous life, one I was determined to see this time around. Moreover, as I looked at the chat box, a message from a longtime fan friend made me sigh. Wealthy fans are really plentiful these days. The final concert was held in our city. My seat was arranged in the middle of the audience, which I had specifically requested. Wen Yuan initially didn't understand why I wanted to sit so far away from him, as he had originally arranged for me to be in the front row, right in the middle, closest to him. I told him mysteriously that I had arranged it myself. Though Wen Yuan didn't understand, he respected my decision. As the concert neared its end, Wen Yuan, the most popular member, performed a solo encore song. The moment he stood on the stage with his guitar, the entire venue fell silent. Seeing this, Wen Yuan looked puzzled on the big screen. The next second, the light from the support sticks in the central audience section slowly converged, until finally, those tiny lights formed a line of words, Wen Yuan, we love you. Wen Yuan on stage, staring at these words, was clearly stunned. At that moment, all the fans were shouting, Wen Yuan, we love you, we want you to know that you are loved, so even if the path ahead seems dark, believe that you are someone else's light. The concert ended successfully. I think this might be the most unforgettable concert for Wen Yuan. I had been planning this surprise for a month, and thankfully, my well-connected, wealthy fan friend helped me pull it off perfectly. Regarding this, I chose to remain behind the scenes. After the successful concert, the manager grandly decided to have the celebration at Wen Yuan's villa. Seeing the beautiful support from the fans, the other 3 members of the group were a bit jealous, and once the takeaway arrived, they toasted and jokingly said, tonight's bill is on the captain. I turned to look at Wen Yuan. Just as he was sipping his wine, he smiled and nodded in agreement. During this time, thanks to my relentless efforts, his relationship with the other members had also improved significantly. After a few rounds of drinks, I excused myself to use the bathroom and stepped out onto the balcony for some fresh air. Tonight was a full moon night. As I admired the moon, I heard familiar footsteps behind me. What are you looking at? Wen Yuan walked out from the shadows. I chuckled softly and pointed towards the sky, saying, look at the moon. Wen Yuan smiled too, and came to stand beside me. After we both admired the moon for a while, he suddenly turned to look at me. Why do you like the moon so much? When he asked that, I almost thought he had found out about my feelings for him. After regaining my composure, it seemed only natural. I had been so obvious about it. It would have been strange if he hadn't noticed, so, I thought for a moment, didn't dare to turn my head to look at him, but instead pointed at the moon in the sky and said slowly, the moon doesn't speak, but I just really like it. Wen Yuan didn't respond and just remained silent for a long time. After a while, I suddenly heard a soft chuckle, but I heard it. What? My heart skipped a beat, and I looked at him instinctively. Meeting his gaze, he kept looking at me, gentle yet resolute. The moon said, "It seems to like you a bit." He paused, then chuckled softly. "Well, more than just a bit." I stood there, stunned, just looking at him. He didn't say the last sentence out loud, but I heard it anyway. Not just a bit, but very much. A year later, the boy band Wen Yuan was part of disbanded. As the most popular member, Wen Yuan established his own studio after the disbandment, thriving as a singer-songwriter in front of the camera, producing hit after hit, sweeping major awards both domestically and internationally. Later, when Yuan told me that this was his real dream. Originally, due to his striking looks, he was chosen by the agency to debut as a boy band idol, but his true dream had always been there. Born long ago in his mother's music classroom, he said, "Xiaxi, thank you for appearing that afternoon, for taking my hand." Hearing this, I just smiled and said nothing. I'm also very grateful to Wen Yuan from a year ago for allowing me to save him. When Yuan established his own studio, and I switched jobs to join him smoothly. Over the next 2 years, under the guidance of Wen Yuan's manager, Sister Zhou, I began to develop towards a career as a professional manager. As the studio grew, the new hires all respectfully and politely started calling me a Sister Xia. Sister Xia. That night during a video call, I cheerfully boasted to Wen Yuan, who was abroad attending an awards ceremony. Who would have thought that the next day, upon returning to the office, the new hires had changed my title from a Sister Xia to a boss lady? What? I was dumbfounded. Was this supposed to be said? Then, following everyone's hints, I opened Weibo under the admiring gazes of the whole studio. Only then did I realize that the top trending topic had somehow become hashtag Wen Yuan officially announces relationship hashtag, marked with an explosive character to highlight Wen Yuan's status as a top-tier singer. When I opened it, I saw that last night, while I had been asleep, Wen Yuan, far away overseas, had silently posted a Weibo entry. The announcement of a relationship by a popular idol singer would obviously cause a huge stir among fans, especially since this singer had just won one of the most prestigious international awards for songwriting. But bizarrely, under Wen Yuan's Weibo post, the comments section was unusually filled with blessings, all because of that girl they had all seen before. She was the one who, surrounded by a group of obsessive fans, didn't hesitate to grab Wen Yuan's hand and lead him out of the crowd. 23. When I was 18, I helped a girl inadvertently, planting a seed. Years later, she appeared before me like a goddess descending from the heavens, becoming a beacon of redemption. It turns out the seed planted in youth eventually blossomed into a magnificent flower. End of main text. Bonus, Daily Romance, 1. When Yuan was diagnosed with depression 2 months before our team disbanded, I noticed something was off and insisted he see a doctor. He was reluctant at first. Finally, under my persistent questioning, he pursed his lips and admitted he was a bit scared. It broke my heart. "You're just sick. It's not your fault." When Yuan was silent for a long time, but eventually, he went to see the psychologist with me. Fortunately, it was mild depression, not too serious. On the way back, I looked at Wen Yuan beside me and suddenly asked, "You knew, didn't you?" After a long silence, Wen Yuan just hummed in acknowledgement. Since when? I don't know. By the time I realized it, it was already like this. Hearing this, my heart ached even more. It must be tough, right? Wen Yuan thought for a moment, then turned to look at me. "Even though saying this might make it seem like I want your sympathy, but Xiaxi, looking back, I think when I asked you to be my assistant, I was subconsciously asking for your help. So, thank you for answering my call for help." 2. Due to the intense dance training during his trainee days, Wen Yuan had developed several minor health issues, and he hates taking medicine. In this respect, he's clearly not as good as 10-year-old Wen Yi. After repeatedly using Wen Yi as an example, where the little girl would gulp down her medicine and look at me expectantly for praise and a loving kiss, Wen Yuan learned his lesson. He too swallowed his medicine in one go, then looked at me expectantly. Me, how can you be more childish than a kid? 3. When Yuan's first solo concert was trending even before it ended, all because just after the show started, sharp-eyed fans noticed a familiar mark on the back of Wen Yuan's hand in the big screen, likely a lipstick mark. Looking at Wen Yuan's makeup today, he wasn't wearing any lipstick. The fans fell silent for 2 seconds. Then silently raised their phones to take pictures as a memento. Thus, among the trending topics, one stood out, hashtag Wen Yuan concert PDA hashtag, all while I sat in the family section, my cheeks burning hot. This man, how could he remember to wipe his mouth, but forget his hand? 4. The day when Yuan won his first award for composition, former group members came unannounced to celebrate. After the group disbanded, everyone had gone solo and, thanks to their prior popularity, were doing quite well. As the drinks flowed, the group's second-in-command started to lose clarity. I knew it from the start, when Xiaxi first came to our company, that she would end up with the captain. Hey, clarify what you mean by end up together." Hearing this, the other two nodded in agreement. "Don't even say it. You really shouldn't say it." Thinking back now, the captain's demeanor was clearly off then. Exactly, he even discussed with manager Zhou how to minimize Xiaxi's impact. When have we ever seen him so protective of us? Well, I just knew we were just picked up halfway by the captain. We can't compare to the years of friendship that others have had since high school. The captain must have had this planned all along, they said. And the three of them started insisting on pouring drinks for Wen Yuan. Wen Yuan smiled without a word, not refusing any drink, one after another, until he himself was drunk. It wasn't until the assistance of the other three came to take them away that I turned to Wen Yuan and asked, "Why didn't you explain just now? We barely knew each other in high school. How could there have been any premeditated plans?" "There was no way to explain," Wen Yuan said softly. His cheeks slightly flushed, "because I indeed had plans for you from the start." I was shocked. "Since when? Remember when you boldly walked into the men's restroom?" He tilted his head slightly, a smile lifting the corners of his lips. "Happier than ever, you said to me, 'Come with me, I'm here to save you,' and from that moment, a beam of light shone into my world.